Good evening. It's nice to see a lot of people out tonight on a night that's not a real great weather night. I appreciate it. Before I forget, anybody that comes in should sign that sign-in sheet so we all have a record that you've been here. My name is Danny Landry. I've met several of you in the past. I'm a project manager with the Structures Division of Vermont Agency of Transportation. And we're here tonight to gather comments for the environmental assessment for the Brattleboro-Hinsdale Bridge Replacement Job, which has been titled BRF 2000 Pred 19 SC. Tonight's agenda is going to be rather informal. I'm not real big on formal presentations, but we're going to start out with Mary O'Leary from the engineering consulting firm of EIB, excuse me, who is a principal author in the environmental assessment. Mary is going to talk a little bit about environmental documents, what they are, why we do them, and then she'll get into this environmental document and discuss some details of it and what the document basically says. After she completes her presentation, and I should point out this is Jackie Picasso, who's also with EIB, and she'll be taking notes and so forth of the comments that are made tonight. After Mary finishes her presentation, we're going to open it up to the field and have people provide comment to the project. And also, if there are questions, I prefer that you eliminate or have those questions relate to clarity of what's been set up here more than exact detail. Much of the engineering has not been, or actually has been no engineering that's been done at this point. It's been all, we have a conceptual idea of what the project will look like in its finished product. So we're going to limit also the comments to, verbal comments to about 5 minutes per person in order to get everyone in. And once we have as many questions as we feel that everybody has had a chance, we can open it up for additional questions and comments too at that point in time. Written comments can be unlimited. We have 15 days left before the environmental assessment is completed. You may write every day. You may write as long as you want. And those comments, along with the verbal comments we hear tonight, will be incorporated into the final environmental assessment document. The Agency of Transportation will attempt to reply to each of those comments if it is appropriate. In other words, there'll be certain comments that we won't apply to or reply to, such as, I'm in favor of the project. Fine, that's great. I'm not in favor of the project. Okay, that's fine too. But we will comment on certain specific comments that you have. For example, you're missing a comma on page 23. Okay, our comment would be, we'll fix that. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to have Mary step up and start her presentation.
Thanks, Danny. So forgive my voice. I was on vacation for 10 days, and I just got in at 2 a.m. in Burlington, so it's been a bit of a hazy day. So I'm also not going to talk a lot tonight because we're really looking for comments from people on the environmental document. So I'm just going to describe what NEPA is and why we're doing a document like this, why we're required to by law, a brief history of the project, I think many of you are familiar with it, and then a brief description of the project, and then we'll open it up for comments. So we're here because of NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. It was enacted in 1970, and it said that any federal project, any undertaking by the federal government has to consider environmental impacts. And not only that, but they have to include public comments and documentation of those public comments. And that environmental impact has grown to include social impacts, economic impacts, cultural resources, and natural resources. So all of those are looked at under a NEPA documentation. And there are 3 levels. The kind of lowest level is called the categorical exclusion. That's for projects that are done over and over by the agencies. For example, for a transportation agency, a categorical exclusion project would be a paving project that stayed within the right-of-way. Right? So there's a checklist that you go through and show that you have met all of those requirements under NEPA for the cultural, socio-economic, and in natural resource qualities. For the next step up, which is what we have here, it's called an environmental assessment. That's when the project is a little different, or maybe a little larger, and you don't know exactly what the environmental impacts are going to be from the project. So you do an assessment to determine what those impacts will be. If after the assessment you find that there is no significant impact from the project, a FONSI is issued, a finding of no significant impact. Those of you who are old enough remember FONSI. If after an environmental assessment like this, you find that there are significant impacts, the project gets bumped up into an environmental impact statement, which probably many of you have heard about. The larger, more controversial projects in both New Hampshire and Vermont run into an environmental impact statement. And it's much more complex, it's a lot more analysis, it's a way bigger document, it takes a lot longer period of time. So we are in an environmental assessment. We feel at this point, we're hoping, that we will be able to get a FONSI, a finding of no significant impact. So the federal agency that is responsible for this particular project is the Federal Highway Administration, because it's a transportation project. So they have reviewed this document already before it goes out to the public. And then, as Danny said, we're going to be taking everybody's comments today. Verbally, we'll write everything down. We have already received comments by email and by letter. We'll continue to take written comments for the next 15 days. And as Danny described, we'll respond to those as well as we can. We'll change the document as we need to. And then we include the transcript of what's happened today, all of the letters or anything that got sent in to us, and any of the changes, documentation of what changes we made from those comments. Those all go with this document to Federal Highway, Rob Sikora, who's sitting in the back of the room, and he gets to look at this and make a determination as the lead agency for this NEPA documentation. Any questions? That's your environmental regulatory process.
Just one more time, environmental, what do you mean by that?
Environmental assessment.
Oh, just the like pollution and that type of thing? Or
No, so cultural and natural resources, economic and social aspects. So that's how this is defined.
So that's what this is about tonight, all the things?
All of those things, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so for the project itself, the project actually started in the 1970s. Long time ago, unfortunately, right? However, it really kicked into, there were a lot of issues with the rail crossing in the Vermont side, back and forth between Vermont and New Hampshire on who was going to handle things. There were budget constraints. There were a lot of different issues that kind of had to be worked out. So the project did really not kick into gear until the 1990s. In the early 1990s, a bridge committee was formed. I believe we have several members here today. And that was a local organization. It was made up of people from, or the select boards from Hinsdale, New Hampshire, Brattleboro, Vermont, Town of Chesterfield, the regional planning commissions on both sides, and then other interested parties and organizations and individuals. And that bridge committee was very active, actually. They met almost, I think, just slightly under 20 times within a few years in the late 1990s and early 2000. They published a newsletter 4 or 5 times that went out to the whole region. They had 2 public hearings, informational hearings, that talked about the project and the preferred alternative that they had recommended. There was also a technical working group that was made up of the design engineers that were involved before we were in this project, New Hampshire DOT and Vermont AOT, and a 4th group that I can't think of right now, a technical working group. They also met about 20 times and have had at least one public meeting or participated in public meetings for that. So then design engineers were hired, but not to do the design of the bridge. It was to do this conceptual design and the alternative studies. So the environmental assessment that I was talking about earlier it's very prescribed what we need to look at. You need to identify the purpose and need for the project. And there's, all kinds of regulations that say what you need to include in this. You need to look at the alternatives for your project. You need to assess each of those alternatives for function, for the social impacts, for environmental impacts, and for cost. So the Bridge Committee helped assess all of those alternatives, helped disseminate that information throughout the public. Between all of those groups and all of the public information that had happened, and between the agencies that were involved, in addition to the regulatory agencies like the Wetlands Group and the Army Corps of Engineers and Fish and Game, there has been a preferred alternative identified, which is option F, and we have it, I'll show it to you on the map, and we have it here in the document. So we were hired about 3 years ago. There had been a lot of work done on this project. A bunch of different companies had worked on it, and so we pulled together all of that documentation. We also updated some of the environmental studies that had become out of date in that time frame, and finished up this document to the point we are today. So it has been, at this point, reviewed by Federal Highway. It's ready to go out to you. It's been out for 15 days. It will be out for another 15 days, as I said. And then we'll be compiling all of that and sending it into Federal Highway. Any questions on that? Nope. All right. So, the existing bridges that we're talking about, 2 bridges that span the Connecticut River. The western bridge actually goes over the main channel of the Connecticut River from Brattleboro to a mid-channel island. Then the eastern bridge goes from the mid-channel island over to Hinsdale, New Hampshire. Both bridges, they were built in the 1920s. They are deemed by the bridge rating system, the National Bridge Rating System, to be functionally obsolete. They have scores of, I think it's 47 and 49 out of 100. So they are structurally deficient, functionally deficient as far as sight distances and things like that. So they need to be replaced. As part of this environmental assessment, we looked at 10 different alternatives. One alternative required by NEPA requirements is nothing. That you don't do anything, that you leave it as it is. That's always a choice. So we looked at that. Of course, that does not meet the purpose and need to have a safe, efficient transportation corridor. Then we also looked at rehabbing the bridges on the existing alignment, replacing the bridges on the existing alignment, and then 6 other alternatives of various different geometry and tweaking of the bridges to come up with the preferred alternative, which is a single-span bridge south of the existing location. And I know it's hard to see from back there. It's this red line here. It's called Alternative F. It's called the Blue Seal option in the environmental document. And if you've read it, because the building there at the time used to be Blue Seal. It's not any longer. But because that's what all the old documents had, we're keeping that name so everybody knows what we're talking about. It's approximately 1,800 feet. It hits in Vermont at Route 142, about 1,000 feet south of the existing intersection. And it hits in Hinsdale, New Hampshire, just slightly south of the existing bridges by George's Field, just south of there. So as Danny explained, this is conceptual. So we don't have a lot of the engineering details set up. So the work that we're doing is based on these conceptual numbers. There are some environmental concerns in this area. There are some wetlands. There's coal tar contamination in the Connecticut River. There are 2 endangered plant species that are in the area. And because we're in the Connecticut River, we have floodway issues and floodplain issues. So all of those issues are discussed in the environmental documentation. We are fairly comfortable that we will be able to avoid the environmental resources or minimize the impacts to them or mitigate for them. And until we actually get the final bridge design, we won't know exactly how many acres. I have a handout for you.
You want me to take care of that?
Sure, thanks.
You want one copy?
I have one right here. So this talks about the 10 alternatives and the different environmental impacts. Should have handed those out before. And approximate costs for the project. Now, fiscal responsibility is part of NEPA. It is not the only part. It's equal to all of the other aspects. Safety, maintaining social and economic relationships in the area, and conserving resources. So on the one side, you'll see an alternate evaluation table. And this goes through each of the alternatives that were looked at, identifies whether or not we meet the purpose and need of the project, and then identifies if there are any issues under some of the design criteria, the fact that we have a design speed set up, construction costs, trying to avoid this coal tar, which is why we're not going north of the project, the existing project. On the back side of this document is the resource summary table for each of the alternatives that we looked at. Alternative F is the preferred alternative. And that goes through agricultural impacts, socioeconomic, air quality, noise, water quality, wetlands, threatened and endangered species, historic impacts, all of those resources that we looked as part of this document. The bridges themselves, our existing bridges, are historic. They will be, under Alternative F, our preferred alternative, they will be preserved. They'll be minimally changed and kept as pedestrian and bike pathways. Yes?
The alternative is to, like you were just saying, conserve those two bridges, but also to build the new one, correct?
Yes.
That's alternative F.
Yes, alternative F is to build the new single-span short shore. Keep the two existing bridges as pedestrian and bike bridges.
Oh, thank you.
Pardon? I'm sorry, not single-span. Short shore. There'll be a number of piers. Their exact location haven't been chosen yet. You're welcome. Is there any questions before I open it up for comments? So the environmental document has been this environmental assessment, which I know you can all use for late night reading if you haven't already. The executive summary, I think, is 20 pages, so you can read that. And then delve into more of the chapters if you are interested. So in the public notice that you all saw, and we have those locations, this is available a variety of places. Each of the planning commissions, New Hampshire DOT, Vermont AOT, we can certainly point you to other places where it is located if you haven't already had a chance to look at this. Yes?
Who will be funding this project?
This will be fun. I think you have a good question. So this is not unique because it happens elsewhere. So for this is Vermont and New Hampshire together. The funding comes through the federal highway, the federal government. Vermont has been in charge of this part, the environmental documentation up to this point, for actual design of the bridge and moving to construction. New Hampshire is going to be in charge of that. That is several steps down the road. First, we have to get this approved. Then there's some negotiations and some other aspects of the project that still need to be looked at. And then New Hampshire will move into design and construction of the project. Yes?
In the future, what if the federal government goes broke and there's no money? Then we go back to the original alternative and don't do anything? Or
Yes.
is there another way of doing this? So the sooner we do it, the most likely we would have a bridge.
Potentially. I If no one has any specific questions, I'd like to open up to comments. If anyone has comments about the environmental assessment, anything you noticed that we said that was factually inaccurate, anything that you think we missed that we would need to put in? Mike?
First of all, the characterization of the traffic on the bridge is incomplete as far as you said that barely 2 trucks could pass the Hinsdale Bridge, and actually only 1 truck at a time usually can pass the bridge. Also, on entrances on both sides of the bridge, there's a geometry issue, and they go off, and so the truck has to stick his nose way out in the traffic, and there's all sorts of issues with obstructing traffic, these trucks going out the other, have to go out the other lane, stuff like that, so that's all.
And geometrically, right, there are definitely issues with both bridges and approachways. That is documented in the EA, the fact, and I think that it said that 2 bridges can't, or 2 trucks can't pass at the same time. That's the difficulty. Because they need to, that's what we're trying to fix. And they can't right now. So you're correct, only that 1 at a time, under certain conditions at certain parts of Route 19 across the bridge, that is correct.
And cars, a car can't pass a tractor trailer on a bridge or its approaches. And stuff like that.
On either?
On either, right. So that means, and also the greater issue is the poor conditions of the bridge. My side of the story is I want you guys, everybody, to start taking dirt in spring of next year. The socio-economic issue of it, of a bridge shutdown, or the restricting the weight on the bridges and all that sort of stuff would be tremendous as far as both communities, and also Hinsdale as far as growth and business growth and stuff like that is a great concern of the bridges are allowed to stand as they are. As far as 2010, there was 7,200 vehicles per day. In 2012, there was 10,000 vehicles per day. And 2015, your report projects 13,000 vehicles per day. And that's a tremendous increase of vehicle traffic. We don't know what the breakout is as far as trucks and stuff like that. The bigger problem, again, is the conditions of the bridges. I think it is grossly inaccurate in your report, and also the DOT. I see tremendous bridge strike, truck bridge strike issues on the bridge. There's tremendous member bending and gusset bending and gusset weakening, and the thickness of the gusset is 1/2 inch, and there's another 1/2 inch of rust on the outside. So how can New Hampshire not even consider the structural integrity of the gusset? These bridges, we know, are critical, fault critical, fault redundant, or fault critical, or fault redundant, whatever it is. A gusset goes and the whole bridge goes in the drain. So we have the footing problems, the Brattleboro west side bridge, that whole entrance, the dirt and everything is all shifting, and there's gusset movement and bending and stuff like that, and it indicates that there's been movement of that side of the bridge and stuff like that. But everybody's playing, let's make believe this is the way it is, and nobody wants to get on there and really look at that bridge.
So you feel that we overestimate, even though we're saying it's structurally obsolete and functionally obsolete, you're feeling that we're overestimating the safety of the bridge, is your comment?
By many magnitudes.
Okay.
And like I said, with this issue of all these members being, all these superstructure members being dented, tremendous damage, tremendous bending of these members and stuff like that, redundant critical, a bridge like that, one of those things can go and the whole bridge can go in, as long as indicating with the footings and the huge truss knuckles underneath the bridges. There's a tremendous amount of wastage on those knuckles and bolts that hold the trusses together and stuff like that. So you have the members that are bent and huge areas of these trusses, well, not huge, I'd say the huge trusses themselves are bent and moved over and stuff, along with all that stuff underneath it. How do we know that the New Hampshire DOT really understands these two interactions together? How do we really know that these bridges are going to last for another 50 years? Because the way it's going now, New Hampshire isn't going to change their politics, and they're starving their transportation budgets, right? It's in stagnation and starving for the last 30 years. They can't act, that bridge was unsafe. They can't act to shut it down if it's unsafe, right? And so the gap of these two things, these New Hampshire officials don't have the courage. They'll face tremendous political outcome if they had to shut that bridge down. And so the gap between these two things, these two impossibilities, is they falsify documents.
Well, I certainly can't speak to that, and I can tell you that we don't have any falsified documents in here. And unfortunately, I can't speak to the New Hampshire budget either. The bridges are rated on an engineering scale that's used across the country for safety. And so they did score low in the 40s, definitely, which is why they're in line to be fixed. But it's not made up reasons. There's criteria and there's specific things that get checked on every bridge. And so that has been done, and that's why we have the numbers in the 40s.
All I'll say, one more thing is that's a near collapse. We're in a part where that bridge is so fragile. There's so many degraded parts. The superstructure underneath the bridge. The New Hampshire dock. I mean, you come up with these fancy words about engineering and stuff, and degrees and master's degrees and PhDs, and you can baloney to people and stuff with this official stuff with engineers and educated and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, you're not asking proof of these guys. They're just throwing you trash and words and stuff like that, and they're not showing you the events that are really going on and stuff. And so just by throwing I'm part of the professional class. And you don't have to have evidence from us. We'll go on our statute and our sense of professionalism. A guy like me, you know what they ask? They ask, Mike, what's your proof? What's your proof that bridge is going to go down and stuff like that? They ask me triplicate proof. They say, they don't trust me. The professional class, they trust them to the infinite. As far as that. So there you go.
All right. Well, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Sir? I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the meeting. What are we supposed to be asking questions about?
So for the Route 119, Brattleboro-Hinsdale, New Hampshire Bridge, this is the environmental assessment. It has to be done by federal law. And so we look at the project, we look at all the different alternatives, identify a purpose and need. In this case, the bridges are functionally obsolete, they need to be replaced. And so we're looking at the alternatives. We've looked at 10. We came up with a preferred alternative after a lot of work with community and regional people and the two agencies from Vermont and New Hampshire. We came up with this environmental document. It's been on public notice for 15 days. It's going to be continued to be on public notice for the next 15 days. And so what we're looking for tonight is specific comments on this document, on the preferred alternative, if you feel that there is anything that we missed in here, if, like Danny said, if we had, we'll take comma, you missed a comma, or you need this, or you called something the wrong name. Editorial comments are fine. Bigger picture comments, any other concerns, anything about the project itself.
I'm from Hinsdale, New Hampshire, I'm a taxpayer over there, and my wife is in a wheelchair, and she occasionally has to have the young ones bring her to the hospital for various items. And I do worry that, there's going to be a train on the track sometime, and they're not going to be able to get there soon enough. That's one thing. Another thing I think about, and I don't really think about it, but what if there's a nuclear accident and everybody has to use that bridge, and you have how many first student buses going across the bridge? I think they come from Brattleboro, don't they? I don't know on that.
That bridge is not in the evacuation plans for the town of Brattleboro.
What's that?
That bridge is not in the evacuation plans for the town of
Okay,
Brattleboro.
Hinsdale has to go over on 119 to Keene, I believe it is, But I imagine there's still going to want to be people, parents and everything else are going to want to vote that way. But I think that would be a really
So some of the things that you mentioned are being addressed with this alternative F, with the preferred alternative F. The preferred alternative will be grade separated for the rail, so the traffic will not back up onto the bridge the way that it does now. So there'll be a lot easier flow back and forth.
Yes.
And one of the considerations for this actual bridge design is to improve emergency services back and forth between the two towns.
That would be wonderful. There was an accident on the bridge today. And
An accident, did you say?
She had an accident, yes. They ripped the side of a box trailer, utility box trailer, and then nice black ones, just ripped the whole side of it right off. It was, I think, a gas truck coming the other way. And so then another truck stopped coming from Hinsdale. So you had to go around this way, around this way, around this way, and that way for the 3 vehicles that were involved. One-way traffic, and it was a real mess. We had a doctor's appointment, my wife did, and I had to get there late. It's stuff like that. It's really.
And that is one, you've just said it perfectly, that is one of the deficiencies right now, the geometry and the width of the road and the consistency of the road across the two bridges. So this alternative F will address that.
That got me at the last meeting I was at a meeting over in Hinsdale, is that they said all their money is going to be funneled into Route 93. You know, I think that's so wrong. I mean, I realize I drove that road for quite a number of years, and it's a mess up there, I realize that. But I think they have to consider, you know, we've got problems down here too. And I imagine the economy would be a lot better in this area if we had another bridge. Brattleboro, I don't think wants a lot of tractor trailers going to Brattleboro, but it would improve the economy. You got 400 acres of land over there, industrial land, which is waiting to be developed over there, and plus the whole commercial corridor over there. And I just think it's too bad.
So the bad news is that this isn't going to happen next year, because normally these things happen. But the good news is that this is a very good first step. You know, this has to happen first in order to go to design engineering and then construction.
But it said in the paper that they were on the 10-year list. They're not on the 10-year list, unless they just went on it recently.
Yeah, I saw that in the paper too. In fact, I commented to Jack.
They're not on the 10-year list.
As far as I know, it's
Yeah,
not
I don't
on the
think it
10-year
is.
Any list.
No.
Yeah, because of the population, I think it's the reason. Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. Sir? Oh, I'm sorry. Sir, I'm sorry.
Dwight Sprady.
Thank you. Oh. You're only going to hear me talking on this, not everyone else. Everyone, sir?
Steve Lindsay from New Hampshire, and have some associations with this area, even though I live up in the county seat. I was a state rep from there. I would like to, we keep referring to these two bridges as the 119 bridges, but they have formal names, just as the Vilas Bridge in Bellows Falls has a formal name, and the CD Bridge in Chesterfield has a formal name. The larger of the two is the Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge, and the smaller one is the Charles Anderson Dana Bridge, named after prominent Hinsdale residents who went on to change the world. And I'd like the media and the government to name the bridges with their formal names. The legislature approved this, the town of Hinsdale and here approved it, the governor signed it, so I'd like that to be put in. I got two other things, and I understand as an avid historic preservationist and a lover of our built environment, I understand that a new bridge is necessary, and I concede as much. But I would like to see the two old bridges remain standing as recreational spans, as well as for emergency vehicles. We are over a major body of water, the interface of two states, two political entities, and I hope that we can save the Charles Anderson Dana Bridge and the Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge and utilize them as a historic recreational and also for emergency resources. Thank you for listening to me. In the interest of disclosure, I'm the one that submitted the bills that named those bridges a few years back. Thank you.
you can get the documentation and certainly include that in your document. And to answer your other point is that the existing bridges are going to be left for recreational and for pedestrian and bicycle use. I'm not exactly sure about emergency services, but we can certainly, they're not at this time, but we can certainly at least include your comments in the document and look into that.
I appreciate it, and thank you for considering the informal names. They have distinct personalities as people who cross them every day realize.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No? Sir?
Edwin Smith. I have served on several of those committees that you referred to in the beginning, and I think it took us a long time to get to this point. There has been a professional assessment done. It points to choice F on our papers here. I think that we should do whatever we can to make this happen. This is shown by the experts who have looked at it to be environmentally friendly. It's shown to be functionally workable. The two bridges that we have now don't meet any of those criteria. There are a lot of criteria that they don't meet. The bridges that we're looking at now are somewhere close to 90 years old, and we're looking at probably 5 to 7 to 10 years before this bridge can be designed and have traffic on it, just because of the process of the engineering and all of the rights of way and other things that have to be looked at during the process. I think it's time that we did focus on choice F and move this forward so that we do get out of the situation we're in now with bridges that are functionally and in many ways obsolete. I don't have all the terminology that the young lady had, but it's time to do the right thing in this case and get a bridge that does. And one of the other points that was referred to a few minutes ago by Representative Lindsay was the impact on our medical, because that's where our emergency medical source comes from, Brattleboro. That's where our emergency medical needs are met in Hinsdale. Other than that, and the hospital as well. The hospital from Hinsdale is 7 miles. The next closest hospital is in Keene, which is 21 miles away. We also have to think about doing these in a timely fashion so that they aren't closed, because if they are closed, it's more than 20 miles from the bridge, the bridges we're talking about, to the bridge in Chesterfield, which is the closest one. The other alternative is down in Northfield, which is about 10 miles further. If these bridges aren't replaced, at the last traffic count, there were 9,700 cars going across these bridges daily. If only half of that traffic goes up Route 63 in New Hampshire, that road is going to be an environmental disaster as well as a lot of other things, because it's going to require a lot of funding just to keep it up. The other big factor in the Vermont side is Putney Road, already congested. If half of those people from the south side of Brattleboro go up to up Putney Road, that road is going to become a lot more congested than it is now. So both states have a horse in this race, I guess. We'll go back to the old Hinsdale harness racing days. Do have a horse in this race, that it's important to get this thing done and get it where it should be so that we can have a better bridge. Thank you.
My name is Bill Bukinski, and I've had the opportunity to serve on the Bridge Committee for the last year or two and have lived in the area for over half of my life. I strongly support alternative F and moving forward with a new bridge as soon as possible. Just to reinforce what Mr. Sprague said earlier in terms of his wife in a wheelchair, my mother, in fact, was 97 in serious ill health for a number of years. She passed away recently, but To get to the hospital, you have to go across the railroad tracks. And that was always a danger for her or for anybody else in Hinsdale that has a heart attack or has immediate medical needs. And I would just like to see that type of thing, if it's possible, to be put into the environmental assessment. The other reality is when the trains go across, obviously all of the cars back up, and it certainly negatively impacts air quality. And I think that could be reinforced within the report. So there are a variety of things in there, but I just want to say I strongly endorse what you've proposed in terms of alternative F and moving forward as fast as possible. And again, it isn't even just the medical care, it's also police, fire. I mean, any safety of Hinsdale, we are to a large extent dependent upon Brattleboro, and vice versa. Sometimes our people come in and help Brattleboro, but when there are trains going across there, we can do nothing. And that's a very serious problem that I just want to, I'd like to see emphasized more within the plan. But again, I fully endorse, strongly support alternative F, and hope we can move forward as soon as possible. Thank you.
Just a quick question with the Brattleboro reformer. Just a quick question for clarification. Would this new bridge go over or bypass the railroad tracks, thus not making the railroad tracks a problem for ambulances or other emergency services? Oh, okay. But it would go over. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Just a quick statement. J.B. Mack, I'm a transportation planner at Southwest Region Planning Commission in New Hampshire. And I'm going to be submitting some written comments, minor things, but one kind of substantive comment that I wanted to make tonight was a little bit of a discussion or a small piece of information about train traffic and changes that we may be seeing in train traffic in the vicinity of the bridge project. Massachusetts and Vermont have been upgrading their rail systems with the idea that they'll be using it more frequently, have more frequent Amtrak service, is my understanding. And you know, also taking away some obstacles so that you can actually have higher loads passing through the area, freight loads passing through the area, is my understanding. I don't work in those states, so I can't verify that, but if you could do a little inquiry with the state, the AOT.
So to clarify whether or not although again, this is conceptual at this point, that the concept is including the possibility to increase train traffic, if that is planned in the region.
My point being is that an alternative where you can bypass the track system will be even more important in the future. And that, you know, it's just as we're showing traffic projections and vehicles crossing over the bridge, what kind of traffic will we be seeing with our train system as well?
I don't know the prediction for that. Thank you. I'll look into that.
That was my question.
That was your point too? Okay. Any other comments? Questions? We will be here for a while if you have specific... Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
My friends in Hinsdale are wondering why I'm not in jail tonight, and maybe I should be. It's associated with the walkway. The walkway's been in terrible condition. The state has known that the walkway, they have loose boards on the walkway, and I've seen from Brattleboro, they go to the convenience store, and there's 2 or 3 people with wheelchairs that use that walkway. It's unavailable in the wintertime because nobody wants to snow blow. A lot of fear that the bridges would collapse if there's a lot of heavy vehicles or machines and stuff like that. And so they had a recent inspection of the bridge. They had actually 2 inspections last fall and this spring and stuff, and a thorough inspection more or less, but they didn't catch the bridge walkway. They didn't catch all the dangerous bridges, all the dangerous boards that were loose, and you know, as you can go with a bicycle and you can blah 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 blah. They're loose boards, and I'm the expert at knowing what's under the boards in Hinsdale because I threw a bunch of them in the river yesterday. And so the thing is, really the thing is that you can't trust the state. You cannot trust the state to do an inspection. You can, they're too politically controlled and stuff like that. That the walkway is a metaphor for how the New Hampshire DOT handles oversight and inspections. And there's, like I said, there's a prime example that they couldn't take that. I was on them in the spring with the inspectors and the bridge inspectors and talking to them and stuff like that. And I explained to him how dangerous these boards are and how the hundreds of thousands of people, and that's what I'm saying, hundreds of thousands of people who've gone past me and who I've saluted and who I threw kisses at, and by the way, females and males, and assortment of antics and stuff like that. How dangerous it is. The conditions are dangerous. What's more dangerous is the state of the New Hampshire Department of Transportation. They cannot fill out paperwork accurately. The bridgeway, the walkway, and stuff like that, which I handled myself by throwing boards over and made it impassable. And they had they couldn't come down on their own, fix it right. So they had to have a bridge angel do the work that the New Hampshire Department of Transportation should have done and stuff. And so, you watch a movie, you see these movies where there's been terrible bridge accidents, right? And in all of them, there's always an angel hanging around the bridge before the collapse. I'm that bridge angel. Thank you.
There was a question over here.
Yes.
I'm Sue Fillion, I'm with the town of Brattleboro. I had a question. It mentioned in the report that there was air quality monitoring done, but I can't quite connect to where the map is. And so I was curious at what time of year that was done, because it's our understanding that Brattleboro is sometimes subject to the temperature inversion in the winter, although there's no air monitoring stations. The closest one is Keene, and a little far away for that. So I was just curious, the traffic backing up now, if it was monitored on a day not in the winter, that kind of thing.
Right. I do believe it was in summer. I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but I can certainly find that information, find what was done. I do believe it was in summer because, we do try to look at the peak issues, which would be when things were backing up. So
it might just be worth mentioning that there is the temperature inversion issue that happens here. So sometimes air quality can be poor in the wintertime. So the continued traffic on the existing bridge backing up is...
Okay, thank you. Sure.
Matt Mann, I'm JB Mack's counterpart at the Wyndham Regional Commission. And to his question or comment about the train traffic and what Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut are in the process of doing is upgrading the rail to 286,000 pounds. It's called the Knowledge Corridor. Vermont's already completed their section up to the Massachusetts line. Massachusetts and Connecticut, as I understand, will probably be completed in 2015, 2016. And that would probably increase the freight traffic. There hasn't been discussion about passenger rail yet. And I've worked with NECR in terms of trying to get out of them their forecast for train traffic, and it's been tough. Some of it's proprietary information. So, but I can definitely be of assistance if we can work on.
And again, at this point, the concept, we just have the concept, so we don't have the actual engineering details, and those types of details would be incorporated as we go forward with final design. But it's definitely an important thing to consider, and we'll make sure we include the comment on that. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much for attending tonight. We will be here for a while longer. If you have any questions or comments, or you want more detailed information, or we can discuss any chapters in the assessment. And if I will leave some business cards out over on the table with the address of where you could put in written comments. It was on the notice that went out, but I'll leave some additional ones here so you can send in formal written emails are fine, don't have to be formal. Text language is probably not so good, but I would probably be able to figure it out.
People that came in late and signed in.
Please sign in. You came in late and did not get a chance to sign in. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.